Oh, it's just a video.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can just do the audio if it doesn't pan out. It's not a big deal.
Okay.
As long as we get the sound, that's all that matters. All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Conversations with Rob. Please listen to us online. And also, obviously, if you're listening to this, you will be listening to our radio broadcast. This is somebody that we're having on who I'm really happy to have on. Carol Roberts, who, I'm only 29, but, even though I wasn't able to vote, I was very involved. My parents, as Democrats, were involved in the election in 2000, and she was definitely involved in that election big time. And she's going to talk about that. But also, she was the mayor of Palm Beach,
West
Palm
Beach.
Beach. I'm sorry about that, and West Palm Beach, and also a county commissioner for Palm Beach County. So, Carol, thanks so much for coming on the program. Appreciate it.
Anytime, Rob. Anytime.
All right, so let's start out, and if you could tell the viewers, I know we talked about West Palm Beach as being the mayor, and also being the county commissioner for Palm Beach County, but tell the viewers a little bit about that.
Uh, I'll tell you a little bit about myself
Right.
to start out. Okay, I'm the mother of 6 children. I have 5 sons and a daughter. They're all grown up. I have 11 grandchildren, so they're obviously grown up.
Right.
In 1975, I picked up a newspaper on a Friday afternoon and found that the incumbent city commissioners had no opposition and they were going to cancel the election. Well, I thought that was terrible. I said to my husband, I think I'll run. And he said, what are you going to run in? I said, I'm not going to run in anything. I think I'll run for city commission. Everybody should have an opponent. And he goes, have you ever been to City Hall? And I go, no. He said, do you know where it is? I said, yes.
Right.
And then so he started to read his newspaper, and I talked to my children. I had 2 sons in college and 2 sons in high school, and one in middle school, and a daughter in elementary school because I had 5 sons and a daughter. To make a long story short, I did run, and the day before the election, I found out that my opponent was going to vote absentee and take a vacation, and I thought that was a bit irregular, and I called the newspapers and said that, and they printed it. And I won the election, and with that, I discovered I was the first woman to be ever elected to the West Palm Beach City Commission, which started my political career. I was a city commissioner from 1975 till 1986, and then I ran for county commission and was elected. And that led me into the Gore Bush election. I was on the canvassing board at that time as a member of the county commission.
Right. So let's talk about what made you run for political office. I mean, I know you say you talked to your husband about it. There was nobody running against anybody. Was that the main reason, though?
No, the main reason was my parents had always taught my sister and 2 brothers and I that we had to vote in every election.
Yes.
This was our voice. This was what democracy was all about, and that we needed to vote. And so I thought that people should have the right to vote, and that's why I ran. I thought we needed to have an election. And if you didn't have people running, you couldn't have an election. So I made the decision that I would run for city commission based on the fact that my parents had inculcated me with that view that it was important for democracy to have your voice heard.
Right. So let's talk about that. So when you were on the county commission and also mayor of West Palm Beach, what were the big political issues that you had to, get through at that time period?
I think that when I started as a county commissioner, we were in the process of drawing up the plan for the county, the development plan.
Right.
That was the big issue, which was in 1986, how Palm Beach County was going to develop. When I moved to Palm Beach County in 1955, I moved from Miami. I'm a native Floridian. I had gotten married, and then my husband was in the Navy, and we came to Palm Beach County instead of going to Miami. He was a physician. In 1955, when I moved here, there were 250,000 people in Palm Beach County. By the time now, which is 2020, there's more than 1,500,000 people in Palm Beach County. So we've grown tremendously. In 1986, development was a big issue in Palm Beach County.
We talk about the development, all not just in Palm Beach County. We know Broward is also really developed too. And the whole state of Florida, there's houses going up galore right now. What was the development like? I know that people are kind of just moving in, and they've really migrated down to Palm Beach County. But about the development side, where do you feel like it's overdeveloped? I guess I should ask now.
Well, Palm Beach County was very careful in setting their rules and regulations in Palm Beach County. We demanded probably more than many counties in that we had a lot more trees in Palm Beach County. If you look at a lot of our shopping centers, you'll see they have more trees in them. We set certain standards that in the county, we had no more than 8 units per acre. Cities could have more. That's because they had more infrastructure available than they did in the county. We understood that people had a right to develop, and people had a right to use their land. But we also knew that we couldn't just give them carte blanche to do anything they wanted. In Palm Beach County, I think we've done a good job of our land use plans, and we've been able to develop in a way that I believe has made us a county that is still a beautiful county. We still have lots and lots of trees and greenery, I think more than Broward County. And I know as you go down some of the, if you look at the difference in the county lines between Dade County, Palm Beach County, and Broward and Broward County, you can see immediately the difference. But people do have a right to use their land within the parameters that we have set or the county has set.
Right. Now, as being a politician and doing a lot of great things for the city and the county, what would you feel like were your greatest accomplishments, and also stuff that you didn't accomplish because of bureaucracy and other things?
I think, interestingly enough, one of the accomplishments I think people should be proud of is that Palm Beach County kept the ag reserve. We kept a large portion of the county in agriculture. When we think about food and the fact that we need to have food, Palm Beach County has thousands of acres that we went to the public and we allowed the public to vote, and they allowed us to have bonds, and we purchased this land. And so that they're in ag, they're not going to be developed. And this, I think, has been an accomplishment for Palm Beach County.
Right. So this segment more about your political career. You were in the canvassing board. We'll talk about that with the election a little bit later on. But let's move on past that to the 2002 election, congressional year. 9/11 just happened in 2001. The Republicans really took control of the House in 2002. Clay Shaw had been in that seat that you ran for years upon years.
22 years.
Right, for 22 years. You hadn't really done anything, voted against, we talked about this on the phone, voted against pretty much everything that in this kind of Democratic county, which people wanted. What made you run for that seat?
A number of things. I don't believe in term limits. I believe that we should have self-imposed term limits. I had served for 16 years on the county commission and felt it was time for new, fresh ideas. And so I decided that I would run for a different office, and I would run for the United States Congress. And my children said, "Mom, but you could stay there forever." We didn't have term limits then. We have term limits now in Palm Beach County. And I think that when people vote for something, you should respect those wishes. We hadn't yet voted for term limits, but I had a self-imposed term limit, and that was my term, 16 years. So I ran for the United States Congress. I ran against an 11-term incumbent. I think some of the problems we're having today, we're still having with health care. And one of the things I ran on was to try and better the health care and the drug, how people are able to acquire their drugs. I can tell you that I don't think we've solved that problem today. I went to a drugstore yesterday to pick up a prescription.
Right.
And the druggist, I said to the druggist, "Okay, I don't really need it, but I'll go ahead and take it." How much is it? And he goes, 407. She said,
Jeez.
$478. I said, what?
Yeah.
I said, at that price, I'm not going to take it. I said, I thought I'm in the donut hole. She goes, sorry, it was a woman.
Yeah.
Well, you are, but you haven't, it's the beginning of the year and you haven't done your deductible.
Right.
And I think that yesterday was the 10th or the 11th, whatever it was,
Yeah.
of January. So I said, and they're charging you for the deductible,
Right.
and they're not, and I go, how much is it normally? I said, it used to be $300 and some odd.
Wow.
He said, and then she said, $500 and some odd. And I said jokingly, well, I don't really need it now. I'll wait until
It goes down.
my deductible when I go to my doctor. I said, but I could go to Paris
Yeah.
for $500 and some odd round trip and buy my medication for $26, which I did last year in Paris.
Wow.
Same exact medicine, except that it's written in French. It's even got the same labeling on the medication.
Right.
So we still have a tremendous problem with what we charge people for drugs. I'm talking about the drugs they need to live. I'm not talking about
Of
street
course.
drugs.
Yeah, of course.
And we still have a problem with our health care. So we haven't solved that problem. And our present administration hasn't solved it either. And neither have past administrations. That was one of the things I ran on. We still have a problem. We have a problem with some of how states' rights, and some of that was actually, I think, with our elections, when we ended up with the United States Supreme Court making a decision rather than each of the states making a decision. We do have something called states' rights in the United States. So that we still have a lot of problems.
Right. So to talk about that, Al Gore, who was big in the 2000 election, did come down and do a fundraiser for you. When you met with him and he did do the fundraiser, did he tell you anything? What was the vibe like? Did he say anything about, hey, Carol, thank you for fighting for me, when kind of, people were, taunting you throughout that process? People were giving you death threats. I know the movie, you can correct me if this is wrong, the people were sending you pictures saying you're a lesbian, this lesbian lovers, all this craziness. And
I didn't get that. When you're a mother with 6 kids, that's kind of hard to accept that.
Right.
I don't remember ever getting that. I got lots of death threats.
Okay.
That is true.
Maybe that's just the point of the movie. Yeah.
Movies, this was not a realistic movie, by the way.
Right.
First of all, they shot the movie in Jacksonville. They didn't shoot any of it in Palm Beach or Broward County, interestingly enough. And it was just a movie. It was not done, it was based on some fact, but it wasn't fact.
So they didn't meet with anybody like you, Teresa, or anybody that was really involved in it to get that kind of oral history? And
No.
Okay.
No, they didn't. As a matter of fact, Teresa and I don't remember if we drove up together, but we watched the movie together in Jacksonville, because the opening was in Jacksonville, and we talked about it and laughed about how this wasn't how it happened, but it's a movie.
Yeah.
So, and we understand it was a movie, and we said something to the director, and we were told it's a movie. So, okay, it was a movie. But Palm Beach County was very much in this whole election in 2000. When it started, I don't think anyone knew that it was going to be like this. I know no one knew. We did a presidential primary, which is in March, which we know is coming up now.
Right.
And when we did it in 2000, the Florida law says that the chairman of the county commission, the chief judge, and the supervisor of election are on the canvassing board. Unless, and in this case, unless your name is on the ballot. In this case, the chairman of the county, it was a chairperson of the county commission's name was on the ballot. She was running for re-election. Therefore, she didn't qualify to be on the canvassing board. So at a meeting, she appointed me. She asked me if I minded being on the canvassing board, and the rest of the board of county commissioners said, oh no, you would do it. You've counted many times on canvassing boards, and we know you like to stay up late at night. So I said, fine. This was probably in February. So in March, we had a presidential primary, and the chief judge appointed what was the youngest, and not in age. It's the youngest that had served as a judge.
This was Burton, the guy.
No, it was not.
Oh, okay.
No, it was not.
Okay.
And the presidential primary, the judge that was appointed served, and Teresa and myself. And after that judge was appointed and we had the presidential primary, he found his name on the ballot. Someone decided to run against him.
Oh, okay.
So they had to appoint another judge. And at that point, Jeb Bush, Governor Bush, had appointed Charles Burton to the bench in Palm Beach County. So he was obviously the youngest judge, meaning the newest judge. And so he was appointed. He hadn't yet gone to judges school. He was so new. But he was definitely a judge. So he was appointed to do the general election.
Yeah.
Actually, he was appointed to do I think if there was a primary, I don't remember if the Republicans had a primary that year or not, or even if we had a presidential primary. So he was, we did that in March, and we had the general election in November. Right. So he was appointed to the canvassing board. And he was then part of the general election. And that was how he got on there. I had been originally appointed. And Teresa, the supervisor of election, is a permanent member of the canvassing board, so it's always there. So the three of us, we convened before the election to do what we call an L&A, which is testing the machines. And we test the machines before the election. And the night of the election, we start after 7 o'clock. We open up the absentee ballots, and most of them have been gone through by the county staff, and anything that was in dispute, the canvassing board, went over. And what is a dispute? Well, under absentee ballots, there are certain criteria that you have to meet in order for you to be able to be counted. One of them is, for instance, you have to make sure that the signature, at that time, I believe you needed 2 people to authorize that you had signed it. I think they've changed that now. I think it may be 1. But then you also have to check to make sure that the signature looks like the signature that your original card had. So if someone, for instance, had an X, and even though they had 2 people that certified they saw him put or her put the X, the X does not represent their signature, and those would be called, there's no way we could certify that this was the person whose name was the same as on their card, which might have been that maybe they had a stroke, or there are a lot of reasons why people use an X, but that doesn't meet the criteria of Florida, so they were not counted. Those are the ones that were given to us.
Let me just jump in, because we just saw this in the 2018 election with the signature problem. But in this election with the issue too, and we'll get back down to that, but I wanted to touch on that. You saw that in 2018 too with the signature problem. But I want to talk more about the election morning.
Okay.
So you get up, everybody's going out and vote. The polls open at 7 a.m. People are getting there. We know Palm Beach County, there's a lot of senior citizens. People come down here to retire. They look at the ballot, and they're punching, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the second hole. And they're doing it for Gore, but Gore was on.
Actually, it was a third hole.
Gore was on the right on the right side.
Let me just tell you.
Go ahead.
Okay, the ballot was put together, and there were 10 parties. Most people forgot this. There were 10 parties running on this ballot.
Right.
And Teresa Lepore decided that she would put them on 2 pages across from each other because of 10 parties, and if they put them on 1 page, the print would be too small, and it would be difficult for some people to read it. So you had George Bush at the top, and then you had Buchanan, then you had Gore. So Gore was actually the third hole.
Right.
So some people made a mistake and voted for Buchanan thinking that was for Gore.
Right.
When the ballots had been approved by the canvassing board, we did not see the holes.
Oh, okay. See, they don't tell you that story.
Okay. We were sent the same ballot that you were sent at home, which was your sample ballot, which doesn't have any holes.
Right, right.
And when we approved it, there were no holes for us to see. I went to the polls about 7:20 in the morning, and I had no trouble voting. And I was voting at an elementary school, and I think most of the people were coming to work, and they were younger, and it didn't look like anybody in my polling place was having a problem. I voted early because I wanted to go to Century Village, which was also in my district. They have 2 precincts. And when I got to Century Village about 7:40 or 7:50, I was mobbed before I even got out of my car by people telling me there was a huge problem. And before I walked in, I said, well, let me go to the other precinct, which was, I think, one was at the synagogue and one was at the clubhouse. And I got to the clubhouse, and they were having exactly the same problems. I just reviewed this, called it was the history that I'm going through now with a memory that I just reviewed.
Right.
A verbal history that's written down, obviously, from the University of Florida. And I went to the clubhouse, and I walked in, and again, people were having problems with the ballot. So I called Teresa, and they told me they couldn't get through to the supervisor of elections office, which was true. So I then called her on her private number, which I had, and I did get through to her. I think that was probably the last time anybody got through to her. And she acknowledged that there were problems, and she was trying to figure out what to do about it. So she had no solution to offer to me, to offer to any of these people.
See, that's the thing that when you watch the news, when you watch the movies, when you look at, they don't tell us, the viewers, that you guys didn't see the holes. They just say, these people approved the ballot. You got a bunch of seniors here that, and this is not trying to be ageist, but, like you said, somebody that maybe they have Parkinson's and they can't really hold the pen to push it down and they do it wrong.
Well, okay, the other thing they don't tell you is that there are instructions with each voting machine. And the instructions tell you to take out your ballot, look and make sure that all the little chads come through. And if they don't, look at the number and see what number didn't come through, put it back in the machine, and then take that number and take and push hard. When you say that to people, they say there were no instructions. Well, there were instructions. That people are so used to just voting that they just skip over the instructions, and they don't realize that they're supposed to look at them. I know that when I voted, the Votomatic machine is what we used then. They do a different one now. But the Votomatic, I would pull out my card, look at the chat on the back, and make sure that all of them were out. And if they weren't, I would take it out. Or I'd look at the hole and put it back in and poke it harder, and then take it out to make sure. But a lot of people didn't do that, and probably a lot of your seniors didn't. I know that during the last 20 years, people would say to me, I'm positive I voted for Buchanan. And when I finally said, well, if all the people that said that to me did it, there would be more than 10,000, and we didn't have more than 10,000 recorded votes. We had about 3,000 recorded votes for Buchanan. I said, so people don't really remember or even knew what they were doing sometimes. They were positive they voted for Buchanan, but we did have, I think, about 3,000 votes for Buchanan.
So you just talked about, Carol, that we knew there was problems. You went to Century Village, which is a big Jewish senior community for the people that don't know here.
It was a big Jewish. It is now a senior community. It's not necessarily a Jewish community anymore, but it was then.
I didn't know that.
It was then.
But now, you heard about all those problems. You go to bed, you come the next morning, we look at the election still undecided. We're looking at CNN on TV, other networks. You wake. What? How do you feel when you wake up in the morning? You know that this fight is coming to Florida, and you're going to have to deal with all the media, all the
I
crazy
didn't know
people.
that. I didn't know that then. The morning we got up,
Okay.
it was a Wednesday. Elections on a Tuesday, and
Yeah.
the canvassing board met again. And what they
Sure.
don't tell you
Movies.
in the movie is that when we got there, we were told that we had to have a recount because it was less than
Yeah.
less than 0.5%, which is Florida law. And I said to the supervisor of election, Teresa, she said, we have to do a recount. And I said, well, where is the notice? And she handed me a press release. I said, that's a press release. Where is the notice? She said, that's the only notice we got. And I said, what do you mean that's the only notice? How do you know that that press release really came from the supervisor, the state supervisor of election? I said, I want to see the official notice. And she said, well, that's it. That's all we got. I said, you mean that we're making a recount based on somebody's press release? She said, yes. So at that point, one of the county commissioners came in, and it was a Republican. Okay. She said, when are you starting? And I said, well, I want to see the official notice. I think we need to have an official notice. The supervisor of the state supervisor, all we have is some kind of a press release. I said, how do we know who signed that? How do we know it really came from the supervisor of elections, the state? And so she said, well, I'll make sure we get it. And she stomped out, which we did not get. And she called the supervisor of elections of the state, who then said to her, I didn't hear all of this. She came back. And she said, the supervisor of elections said her official notice is a press release. And that's what all of the 67 counties went on. I don't think most people knew that.
No, I didn't know that. So now, in this, like I said, I'm only 29. I was 10 or 11 when this happened. So I'm hearing my parents say, I'm watching from movies, reading from stuff on, a lot of the news that, they put kind of what they want. We saw what I was told, that Judge Burton asked the supervisor of elections for the state to have, or the supervisor of election for the state had someone come down to Palm Beach County, a woman, to help them decide about the dimpled chads.
Okay.
Is that
what happened was, I don't think that Charles Burton asked for anyone to come down.
They
What
just
happened
came down.
was that Catherine Harris, who was the state
Right.
supervisor of election, who, by the way, was George Bush's campaign manager for the state of Florida, even though she was a supervisor of election.
right?
Which would be somewhat biased, even though I was accused of being biased because I had a
Gore sticker on your car.
I had a bumper sticker on my car. But she was actually the supervisor. She was actually the supervisor of election of the state of Florida. Was George Bush's campaign manager for the state of Florida. So, so she did send down an attorney whose last name I believe was Carpenter.
Right. Yes.
And I didn't know who she was even. But Judge Burton and she apparently started talking to Judge Burton.
Right.
And she convinced Judge Burton that she was an unbiased spectator and was giving him advice. So on Wednesday, we were requested to have the recount and the 1%.
Right.
And we said, okay, we do it the next day. Actually, we weren't requested. We were mandated by this press release that we have a recount.
Yeah.
And Gore, Vice President Gore, then asked that we do a 1% recount, which is under Florida law, which in the case of Palm Beach County was 4 precincts that added up to, it turned out it was a little bit more than 1%. And the Bush people asked for a manual recount, which had been mandated, and meant we put everything back into the machines. We also had Clay Shaw at that time was running against Elaine Bloom, and he asked for a recount. She asked for a recount.
Right.
Yeah. We said no.
Oh, okay.
We turned it down, which ought to show you we were not biased. And here we had 3 Democrats who said no to a Republican. Actually, a Democrat, Elaine Bloom, asked for it. She was a Democrat running against, and we said no. There were 600
And
votes.
that race was really fairly close, correct?
There were 600 votes. That wasn't that close.
Wow.
Yeah. Because it was only in a
Small
a
district.
defined area. So we then on Thursday started the recount.
Yeah.
And Teresa, according to Florida law, you have to have one member that's a Democrat, one member that's a Republican, and if you can't find enough of those, then you have a no party. And they're the ones that sit and recount. And Teresa took it from her staff and have made sure that she met the Florida law, that one member doing the recount was a D and one member doing a recount was an R, and they had enough. I don't believe they used any no party.
Yeah.
We were set up so that everything was in windows. Anybody could see, and there were press from many, many parts of the United States and the world. We hadn't had yet the full press coverage.
Right.
But they had television cameras pressed to all the windows.
Yeah.
And we also allowed a pool reporter to come in while this was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So there was lots of coverage.
Right.
And we, at that point, things began to take a strange turn. The Democrats and the Republicans asked if they could have observers for that.
Yeah.
And we said yes. And we had done recounts. I had done recounts with Buddy McKay, who was a statewide, and we had done a number of hand recounts, not 460,000, that's how many, 460,000 plus in Palm Beach County, but we had done some hand recounts for the 1%.
Yeah.
And we knew it took us maybe 4 or 5 hours, and this was a little bit more, and we thought it would take us 6 or 7 hours.
Right.
At that point, the Republican observers began to pull every card.
Right.
And say, they questioned them all, and any card that was questioned, any ballot that was questioned, came to the three of us.
Okay.
Well, if you're going to count 4,600
Yeah.
by hand instead of having 6 tables or whatever we had doing it,
Yeah.
some of I objected and said, if the Democrats don't claim there's a problem, why are you claiming there's a problem? Because we are.
Right.
So we made an objection. I think Judge Burton came in. We had taken a break, and he told them they had to stop doing that. They had to show that there was a reason why they can claim there was an objection. And these were only and then there was a fight going on between the D observer and the R observer, and we said, we're going to throw them out, all of them out if they keep doing that.
Right. So what? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was saying it took us about 12 hours to count that 1%, which normally would have taken us about half the time. And I really felt the Republicans had been instructed to obstruct.
Yeah. So they were just trying to run the clock out then.
Yeah, they were trying to make us take as long. Remember, this is only the 1%.
Right.
They were just trying to make us take longer and obstruct.
Right.
Anyways, we did finish, and there was a difference of 19 votes. Yeah. And at the middle of the night, because we didn't expect to be in the middle of the night, we're now in the middle of the night. And I looked at Florida law. I'm not a lawyer, but, and I laughed, I've probably said that tons of times. My county attorney is probably laughing because I said that in those days too. I'm not an attorney, but. Right. But I looked at Florida law, and according to the Florida law, it said something that if there was something that made a difference in an election, you could ask for a total recount. Now, I'm not giving you the exact words because I'm not an attorney.
Yeah.
So I asked for a recount, a total recount then. That's how we got to that total recount.
Right.
So on Thursday, we met again, and we voted, and Teresa came back with the plans to have the recount. No, she said she would come back with the plans on Saturday, because Friday was Veterans Day. Right. And the county was totally closed.
Yeah.
Okay, now what do you want to ask me? Sorry.
No. I appreciate that. I like to hear this. There was a vote that was 2-1. You voted. You were the one that voted against, and it was to shut the recount down.
We hadn't started recounting.
Oh, this is more down the line where they.
This is down the line.
Yeah, where was it 2-1? Burton voted.
Okay, what happened is that Teresa hired her own attorney, Bob Montgomery, who's since passed away. Yeah. And Judge Burton and I agreed that we could use the county attorney.
Okay.
And the first vote was when I asked for the recount.
Yeah.
And at that point, it seemed like Miss Carpenter had gotten to the judge. Yeah. And he didn't know the process. Robert's rules, not my rules, but Robert's rules we operate under. And under Robert's rules, when you have a motion on the floor, you can't make another motion until you vote for that. So I made a motion. We have a recount. Teresa seconded it, and Judge Burton was furious, and he said, "I want to make another motion." I said, "Under Robert's rules, you can't do that." I said, "First of all, the chairperson is not allowed to make a motion, and you're the chairperson officially. And second of all, until a motion is voted on, you can't make a motion."
So was this really out in the public?
Oh, absolutely. Everything's out in the public.
I mean, like, not just the press. I'm talking about regular people. Press was there
Anybody
watching
who wanted
this.
to come. This was the middle of the night.
Yeah, wow.
So at one point, finally I asked, after an hour of him asking all kinds of people to speak and all that, I said, under Robert's rules, the maker of the motion can ask for a vote. And I'm now asking for a vote. Yeah. And under the process, you have to have a vote now. Yeah. Because that's what it says. So that was a 2-1 that we voted for. Yeah. When we came back the next day, we had some attorneys there, and by now we had Bruce Rogo, who was a constitutional attorney who apparently Teresa had hired, and I didn't know that Bob Montgomery wasn't her attorney anymore. And the county's attorney was on vacation, so we had a different county attorney that particular night. And Judge Burton asked if we could have the supervisor of the election, the state supervisor, review the plans. So I said to the county attorney, is that something that would keep us from counting? And he said, no. And I said, are you positive that if the supervisor of elections, so he said, I'm positive. So then I asked Bruce Rogo, who is a constitutional attorney, he said, I'm positive all she's doing is reviewing it. It won't affect anything. Yeah. I was still very hesitant, and I voted against sending the review. So, but then I said, why don't we have the Attorney General of the state of Florida review it also?
This was Butterworth then, at that time, correct?
I believe it was Butterworth.
Yeah.
And so I think I may have voted for that. Anyways, so I said, if you don't see anything wrong with the supervisor of election, you shouldn't see anything wrong with the Attorney General. So I asked for a vote for that. So we said, okay. So we sent it to both of them. And within 3 or 4 hours, an answer came back from the supervisor of elections who said, I forbid you to vote. I forbid you to count. Okay. And I said, wait a minute, you said that there was no way they could do that. Well, we made a mistake. So within another 2 or 3 hours, we got back from the Attorney General of the state of Florida who said, I say you can count. So now we had where one said one said the other. So we ended up, we had a lot of court cases going on too in Palm Beach County. Judge LaBarga, he became a Florida Supreme Court justice. Judge LaBarga said he didn't see any reason why we couldn't count. Anyways, this had been going on from at one point we had changed to the place where we were counting now, and it was very open but much, much larger. It was the emergency center.
Right.
And at that point, we still hadn't started counting. And a week and a day had gone by, and Broward County was counting. I think Dade County was counting, and we weren't counting.
Mm-hmm.
So I now had some local judges who had said we could count. And I had Bruce Rogo saying we couldn't count, and I was being stubborn, and he was a constitutional attorney, and here I am telling him he's wrong. But I did it anyways because I said people's vote is their voice.
Yeah.
And this is what democracy is all about. And at one point I said, there is no judge that has told us that we couldn't count.
Right.
At that point, I said, what would happen if we counted? Bruce said, you go to jail. And I said, I'm willing to go to jail.
Right. Okay.
Because no judge has told us. Because it happened to be 2-1 the other way that we shouldn't start counting.
Right.
And that's when I was furious. Because that's true. Today, it's still true. People's voices, their vote, and that's what democracy is all about. It wasn't about who was going to be the president of the United States. It was about our democracy, and that's what it's about today, too, in my opinion.
Right. No, I agree. So let me go into this. We've seen a lot of the death threats. We talked about that a little early on in the interview. Catherine Harris was put in the full court press by bringing, I forgot the woman's name, but the attorney down there on Judge Burton, McHenry or whatever her name was.
Well, first, you mean Carpenter?
Carpenter, yeah, Carpenter. So they were bringing the full court press down on you with the death threats. People were protesting. They were trying to make it look like a Yahoo show over there. Do you feel like in the end that kind of got to some people and they just wanted to, end the recount, just said, like, let's just get over this. We're tired, we're tired of being here. We're tired of counting. We're tired to...
That didn't happen.
No?
No. That's what the Republicans wanted people to think happened.
Okay.
But do you know the name David Gergen? He's still around. Okay, David Gergen came down and he said, everything I heard, that's not what I see. And I said, what are you talking about? Because we had been busy counting, so we didn't know, I hadn't been watching television. Right. He said, well, the Republicans are saying there are chads all over the floor and people are having fights and people are screaming and hollering at each other. He said, but when I came down, I didn't see a single chat on the floor. I didn't see anybody pushing anybody. I didn't see anybody screaming and hollering. I saw very orderly, everything was going on. It was quiet. He said, and I said, well, it's been that way the whole time. I said, all you had to do was turn on television because for 24 hours a day, we were on television.
Right.
I said, and none of that was as the Republicans were describing it. And many people called Republicans and Democrats who were watching and said, why are we hearing this? We don't see it.
Right. So
there was a lot of
misinformation then.
A lot of Republican misinformation.
Right. Who's the fault? Who has, in your opinion, whose fault is the 2000 election debacle? Was it the Gore campaign? Because they didn't ask for recounting all 67 counties. They asked for the 3 Democratic counties, which was a great talking point for the Republican Party to say, hey, you asked for the 3 biggest Democratic counties in the state of Florida when Volusia County had problems also. There was problems in Orange County.
Duval County had, we had the butterfly ballot, and Duval County had the caterpillar ballot. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I'm not.
Okay, in Duval County, which is the Jacksonville area, they had, instead of printing them on side by side, remember, there were 10 parties on Florida's ballot.
Right.
What Duval County did was have 5 on one page and 5 on the next page. You turn the page, and if you read the instructions, which I just told you people don't read,
yeah, of course,
it said vote for one person, one party.
People would vote for 2.
And people would turn the ballot, and they'd vote again.
Yeah.
And that was called the caterpillar ballot. So those are overvotes. Those aren't counted. They're undervotes and overvotes. So Duval County had a big problem also, plus other counties in Florida had problems.
When speaking with Al Gore at the event he did for you, did he bring up any of this stuff? Did you say, hey, I mean, it's not your place, you're running, he's the vice president or former vice president. You're not trying to, go after. But like, why didn't he ask for all these ballots? I mean, for all these counties to be recounted. Why do you think?
I can tell you that I didn't talk to a single Gore person during this whole recount.
Okay.
I didn't talk to Gore, nor did I talk to anybody from his campaign. No one ever called me.
Right.
When Gore came, it was 2 years later, we did
Right.
not talk about the election.
No. He didn't even say, thanks for doing what you did.
We didn't talk about the election at all.
Wow.
He was here to help me try and
Win that seat.
get elected. Yeah, win that seat. So no, we didn't talk about it. He didn't say anything.
Oh, well, okay.
You asked me, did I think, Gore should have done more? And in reading all this that happened, I think that probably everybody was responsible for what happened. I think that both the Democrats and the Republicans were responsible. I don't think the Democrats took enough responsibility. I think that, if you remember, Gore lost Tennessee.
Yeah, I know. And he lost New Hampshire, too.
Well, Tennessee is his home state.
Yeah.
So if you can't win your own home state, you're not really doing what you're supposed to be doing.
True.
So I don't think that we need to point our fingers only at Florida. When the next year I went to New Mexico for whatever reason, I think for the National Association of Counties.
Yeah.
And I was talking with a supervisor of election for New Mexico. And that person told me that they were so happy it was Florida that the light was shining on, because New Mexico had the same problems we did.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't just Florida, and it wasn't the fact that, did I think Gore was responsible? I think everyone was responsible.
But don't you think the Republicans came to play where I feel, and this is my opinion, that the Democrats didn't? We talked about the 67 counties. We look at Jeb Bush. He had all the law firms in Florida said if you go and work for Gore, they were going to basically screw him. They had the Secretary of State.
I don't know that. You're telling me something I don't know. What I can tell you that I do know is that Jeb Bush, according to what I have read, I don't know if it's true or not, used a lot of Florida's money, as did Catherine Harris during that recount, to use equipment from Florida that Florida taxpayers paid for.
Right.
So that Republicans were using state money. I know that a county commissioner who was a Republican was using county equipment, which taxpayers were paying for.
Right.
So I believe that everybody bears some of the blame.
Yeah.
I believe that everyone lost sight of the fact that a person's vote is their voice, and this is what democracy is all about.
Agreed.
That it wouldn't have mattered to me whether who was ahead. It mattered that we counted everybody's vote, because that is what democracy is all about.
So let me ask you this. You were right there for all the Palm Beach recount. You saw the ballot. You know the whole ballot through and through. Do you think Gore won the state of Florida in your mind?
I'll tell you, again, I have Palm Beach County, Gore won. We had 120,000 plurality.
Okay.
There's a difference. There was a difference in Florida, 535 or 545 votes were what the difference was. Yeah. On that particular day, when the supervisor mandated a recount, there was a difference somewhere between 700 and 900 votes statewide.
Yeah.
So, and I think Bush had that, but was ahead by that. Who won? I can't tell you who won because I don't know.
Well, let me just say this. The recount was cut short because, and you guys didn't get to finish, correct? Because it went to the Supreme Court. They took that case.
The reason we didn't get to finish was because of Catherine Harris.
So she just cut it short then?
No, Catherine Harris said, I can make a decision to let this go till Monday morning or cut it short on Sunday. I'm telling you, all the recount has to be done by Sunday at 5 o'clock.
But you guys were almost done at that point when it was about to be cut.
One of the problems was that Teresa Lepore didn't know how to delegate responsibility. Okay. And Teresa, in Broward County, whenever you did um, tabulation of all the votes that were counted.
Right.
They were tabulated by a group of people. In Palm Beach County, Teresa would only allow Teresa to do that, which meant that the three of us had to stop counting while Teresa tabulated all the tables votes.
So that ate up time.
That did.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
did. If we had done, if Teresa had allowed us to do what Broward County did, to have the county staff tabulate all those numbers, we would have finished.
Okay. So you think it was more, and I'm not trying to have, push her out under the bus.
I'm not trying to push
yeah.
Teresa. I'm telling you that this is what happened, and it's
Right.
my opinion that we could have finished.
Right. Okay. So it will be more on that situation than Catherine Harris, then, you feel?
No, I think Catherine Harris was very much involved too, because she knew what was going on. Therefore, by making it Sunday, she knew we wouldn't finish.
Right. Well,
If she made it Monday, we would have finished,
right.
even with Teresa taking the time. So I believe that they're both responsible.
There was talk and like I said, it's the movie, that Clay Roberts, Catherine Harris's number 2, said, let him go, let him finish. They're almost done. Let him finish. And that guy Max
Stefanovich, Max.
he was the one that put the hammer down and told
Max.
her to close it.
Max just retired, by the way.
Right. Yeah, I saw it in the
but
newspaper.
Max Stefanovich was actually an advisor to
Jeb.
No, at that point he wasn't an advisor to Jeb. But at that
But wasn't
point,
he close?
He
with
was
the family?
He was advising Catherine Harris.
Right. Yes. Yes.
And they say Catherine Harris was a dilettante, and he assigned Max Stefanovich to advise her because she was not aware of all the law and everything, and he was.
Right.
So he told her that according to what I was told, I don't know if it's true or not, he told her to cut it off on Sunday because if we let it go to Monday, they would always have, then we'd have a lot of law cases that people were saying this and that they'd have a lot of court cases.
Right. You were a Democratic politician. You were involved in the party. Why don't you think in 2000 that nobody put up a fuss to say this is George's little brother's is the governor of the state. Catherine Harris, as you said, was the co-chair, the campaign manager for Florida.
She wasn't co-chair. She was
the chair for the state of Florida for George, and nobody said anything. They had 20,000 black voters. They had that list, the voter purge list. I don't know if you heard about that.
I did.
Yeah, the 20,000 votes with those people that about 99% of them weren't even criminals. They couldn't vote. Why didn't anybody see any of these things and say any of these things before the election? And they came to earth after the election.
You're asking me a question I don't know the answer to.
Right.
I was a local politician, but I believe in doing what's right, and I've always believed in that.
Right.
I've been a registered Democrat my whole life because when I went to register in Florida, we didn't have any Republicans that were.
Right.
I mean, it was a Democratic state. Of course, it's not any longer. But in those days, when I was 21 years old and went to register, I'm 83 now, so you can figure out what year I registered.
Right.
It would be, if you lived in Florida, you were a registered Democratic voter because we didn't have Republicans. We didn't have Republican primaries. We didn't have people who ran for office. There was nobody to vote for.
Right.
So by the time things changed, I was always happy to stay a Democrat.
Right.
But I also believed in doing the right thing. That meant as a county commissioner, if I disagree with my Democratic colleagues on something, I voted maybe the way the Republicans did. To this day, I don't believe there's anything in the county commission that should be partisan because things like roads and things like parks, there's nothing really partisan. And I still believe that today, but only cities in Florida are nonpartisan. Counties are partisan. Constitutional officers are all partisan.
Right.
I mean, I don't think it should be partisan. A sheriff, I don't think it makes sense.
Protecting the people.
Whether they're D or R, they should be qualified.
Yeah.
They don't, because what they do has nothing to do with being a D or an R.
The New York Times did write an article back in 2001 that said if all the 67 counties did finish that recount, they believed that Gore would have won that election.
That's they can say whatever they want.
True.
Did they understand that there was no standard for the state of Florida,
Right.
or qualifications about how you counted those votes? We all had different machines.
Yeah.
So how can you make a statement when everything is there were no standards? One of the things I thought we should change in Florida is we should have a statewide standard.
Yeah.
So everybody has the same exact qualifications and the same things, same standards for counting, which I don't think we still have.
Right. No, that's fair to say. Speaking of a few more questions left. Speaking about election law, and also the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
We saw in 2000 what happened. We saw in 2004 with the computers. People pressed Kerry. It went to Bush. Not so much in Florida, but there was a little bit in Florida, but in other states too. They had a debacle in Ohio that year in 2004. In 2018, we saw the signature issue. We saw that whack job that said all those threats to Clinton and Obama in Miami. They closed down that whole mail center, and a lot of the absentee ballots didn't get counted because they didn't get to the offices in time due to that issue.
I'm not sure that was true.
Right.
I heard they did get there. So it depends
Okay.
on. I mean, if what you read in the newspapers is
Fair.
is not.
Well, you would know more than me because you know more of the inside game than I'm.
Yeah.
Like you said, I'm just learning from the newspapers.
I mean, and I know that because
Right.
it's important to read the newspapers.
Right. No. I hear you.
But I know that sometimes when I inquired personally, that I found that wasn't necessarily true. And what
Okay.
you read, I read in different things in different newspapers, by the way,
True,
whether they made
that's
it or
fair,
not.
yeah.
So I don't
Everybody
know.
has
whether,
their bias.
but I can tell you that the death threats were all true. I mean, I had people tell me that I better be careful because I'm in their gun sight.
Wow, that's really scary. So how did you take to that? Like, did
Well,
you have?
Okay, the night I got home, my
Yeah.
answering machine was blinking all over the place, which never happens. And my husband had gone to bed about 11 o'clock, which is pretty normal, and he didn't know I had asked for the recount.
Yeah.
Because he was in bed, and it was like 4 a.m, so I started to
Jeez, yeah.
listen to. I had no idea why it was blinking all over the place, and there were a few things that said "Go to it, girl," but
Right.
most of them were death threats. It said you
Wow.
better watch both ways when you cross the street. It might not make it across.
Wow.
There were a lot of not so nice words, swear words.
Yeah.
So I woke my husband up, and I said, "I
Yeah.
think you ought to listen to this."
Right.
So he did, and he got on the phone. He called the police department and said, "You guys, my wife's been threatened." And they said, "Well, okay, we'll send somebody." And the beat officer knocked on the door. Then maybe 5 minutes later, and he said, "I'm here to protect you.
Yeah.
I'm staying all night." And I go,
Wow.
"Really?"
Now, how long did that last? Because the recount lasted quite a while, a few
Okay.
weeks.
What happened is the next day, the city said to the county, "You have to take over protecting Commissioner Roberts because
Right.
she goes out of the city for this." And apparently Teresa had gotten, she was living in the county, so that she apparently had gotten, almost immediately had gotten also protection. And I don't know about Judge Burton, but she lived in the county, he lived somewhere in the Boca area. Anyways, we all ended up getting protection because we
Yeah.
all had death threats.
Yeah. So how did you take to that? That must have been extremely scary, Did you always were you always on edge throughout this whole process?
Not really.
Oh.
I'm a very calm person. I was
Yeah.
being protected by the county, and that was fine.
Yeah.
What was scarier to me, what was more upsetting, and it still is today,
Yeah.
is I'm still recognized all over the world. This is almost 20 years later.
Yeah.
I was going to Myanmar. I had planned this trip many, many months
Right.
in advance, and I had to delay my trip a week,
Yeah.
but I still went to Myanmar.
Right.
So I'm going around the world. I had to change my plane reservations.
Right.
And people would come up to me on the plane. They'd walk back and forth and go, and I was in Time Magazine and U.S. World Report.
Yeah.
People would say, "Oh, you're that lady. Would you sign this?" I mean, perfect strangers wanted my autograph, which I found astounding. But 5 years later, I was with my kids. I think 4 or 5 of my kids and my husband,
Yeah.
and we were in Italy, and we were going to
Wow.
Capri.
Yeah.
And we had come back in the 2 cars, and some lady came up to me, and she threw her arms around me, and she said, "I love you. You're wonderful." And I said, "That's really nice of you, but who are you?" Well, she recognized me 5 years later from the election.
Wow.
I was walking another year or two after that with my niece and my son,
Yeah.
and we were in the Coliseum. And these 2 young men were following us, and one of them finally said, "Are you from Florida?" And I looked at my son. My niece hadn't really experienced this.
Right.
And I go, "Yes, I am." "Oh, I told you that was her. I told you that was her. Can we have an autograph?" And my niece looked at me and said, "Does this happen often, Aunt Carol?" And I said, "Unfortunately, yes." So,
Right.
I mean, I had taken my granddaughter to Amsterdam. I'm taking, she's, I guess, maybe 10 years after the election.
Okay.
And we were in a store, and this woman said to me, "Oh, you shop here all the time, don't you?" And I go, No. I said, "I don't think I've been in Amsterdam in 20 years. Why would you say that?" She said, "Well, you look so familiar."
Yeah.
And my granddaughter said, "Oh, well, maybe you recognize my grandmother. She was the Chad lady." By this time I had, so she goes, "Oh,
Yeah.
I was in Papua New Guinea and got recognized."
Wow.
From television.
That's
a
really
young man on a
impressive,
plane
yeah.
said something to me and asked me for an autograph.
But is it mostly, like you said, autographs, people giving you well wishes, not any hostility then?
There's no hostility. I don't think I'd find hostility now. Only people who were well wishers. The hostility came right at the time.
Yeah. But you feel that was probably drummed up by the Republican establishment.
All I know is that all 3 of us, I know that I got death, and I think Teresa did. I didn't ask Charles; he probably did too, because we all had protection.
Okay. The last few questions, we talked about, and I know we talked about the design ballot. How do we fix? I know you said you want that uniformity throughout the state of Florida, but how do we fix these problems? We saw in 18 what happened, in 2000 what happened in Florida. How do we fix this so it's not always people making fun of the state of Florida, saying Florida and all this other silliness?
I don't know how you fix that. I do think that you can fix by having a statewide standard for the elections. I think that if they were able to pick one type of a machine,
Yeah.
and we were to have standards, I don't think we use chads today. We do other
Right.
things. But if we had a statewide standard, then everybody would be counting the same kind of a ballot in the same way.
Right.
That you probably have a better count. I don't think you'll ever have a complete count or a perfect count, because
like
we're human beings. I can tell you that many people from other states that had the voting machines that you used to pull the curtain
yeah.
and you pulled down a little thing.
Right.
Said, "We need to go back to that." And I said, "Do you understand that was marked in a roll in the back with a mark?" And they go, "No." I said, "And if there was a mistake or there's something happened to that particular machine,
Yeah.
you pulled it down and nothing was ever recorded?" They go, "No, I didn't know that." I said, "That's why they changed all of those voting machines. Most people
Right.
today don't know that."
As a person that's worked in elections, do you think we'll ever vote online? And if we do, will it be safe?
We do at some states. A state of, I think, either Washington or Oregon now vote online.
Will it go universal, though? Because we hear about all this stuff with the Russia stuff in 16 and all this other silliness.
I don't know. I think that it might, but I don't know. I'm not a technologist. I don't know enough
Right.
about technology to tell you that I believe that should. That we can depend upon that, because I don't think that I don't know enough about technology. I'm sorry.
Right. So let's end the interview with a few quick questions.
Okay.
What did you learn personally from the election 2000?
I learned how important democracy is and how fragile democracy is.
Mm-hmm.
We are a democratic country, and we need to protect that democracy. It's a very fragile thing, and that's probably the most important thing I learned, that if I could broadcast that to all of the United States, it would be a very important lesson.
We are in Trump country, even though this is a Democratic area. This is Mar-a-Lago. We talked on the phone. You being in the county commissioner seat, working with Donald Trump. Can you tell the viewers a little bit about any of that stuff?
Well, I can tell you that Donald and I sat in my office and negotiated the golf course that he plays on now.
Right.
And the golf course is, Donald has a very long-term lease. And when we negotiated that, I think the best negotiations are the ones that nobody's happy.
Yeah.
And nobody was happy. And at one point, Donald had said to me, where did you learn to negotiate?
Yeah.
And I laughed and I turned to him and said, there was a book called The Art of the Deal. And he goes, I knew that dumb book would get me in trouble. And we laughed. And Donald wanted pay less, and I wanted the county to pay more.
Yeah.
And we came to a negotiation that we were all comfortable with. We weren't necessarily happy with it, but we were comfortable because he pays a lot of money to the county. And
so that's lease then?
It is a lease. It's a long-term lease.
So not many people know about that, I feel.
No, they don't. I think it's a 90-year lease, something like that, either 70 or 90 years. But I think it's 90 years. That's a long-term lease.
You ain't kidding. Now, like I said, this is Trump country, even though it's a Democratic county. What are your thoughts about Donald? You met him quite a few times. We just talked about the negotiations you did with him. What was it like, the personality? Was it, is it on TV and when he does the rallies, is that more of an act? You saw him firsthand. How do you feel about it?
Okay, I haven't seen Donald in a long time.
Right.
When he was in my office and we would meet at Mar-a-Lago for whatever charity I was at, because I didn't belong to Mar-a-Lago, but I did go on occasion. He was always very pleasant. He can be a very pleasant, charming person when he wants to.
Yeah.
I didn't experience any of the non-pleasant, non-charming.
Did you see any of the womanizing stuff around, or any kind of...
I never saw any of that because I only saw him at Mar-a-Lago, and he was either with Ivana, his wife, or or with Marla. I did not see him with his present wife.
Melania, Palm Beach County went to Hillary.
I don't know what that is.
I don't know. They must be trying to make us move quicker.
Yes, it is.
So we'll end with two more questions. This is Trump country. But Hillary Clinton did do really well in Palm Beach and Broward County, as did Andrew Gillum in the 2018 election. What would it take for the Democrats to win the state of Florida again?
I think it would take a whole bunch of people to come out and vote.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people... I think what bothers me most about all of the United States is that I was able to be a human rights observer, which I don't think you know.
No, I didn't know.
In Estonia, I don't know what that is. I have no clue what that is. I got to be I was a human rights observer in Estonia.
Yeah.
And I was able to see that like 98% of people turn out to vote.
Yeah.
In Florida, actually in the United States, I think the maximum we've ever had is like a 60% turnout.
Why do you feel that is?
I feel that people just have a laissez-faire attitude about voting. They think it doesn't count, and I can tell you it does count. I lost an election once by one vote.
Wow.
In the city of West Palm Beach.
Incredible.
So, and what happened was for about 2 months, I go to parties and the like, and people kind of avoid me, and I think, my goodness, I must have done something to offend them.
Yeah.
And one by one, they came over and said, I feel so badly, I forgot to vote.
Wow.
So I can tell you that one vote, that I would like to see us, like Australia, I would like to see us mandate voting, which Australia does. And if you don't go and exercise your right to vote, unless there's a very, very good reason, you get fined.
Unfortunately, the Republicans will say that's too much government.
Well, if there's too much government, there's a lot of things I think we have too much government that the Republicans mandate. But that's another story. I believe that if we did that, then maybe we would have better elections,
Yeah.
and we ought to have some uniform standards in each state. I don't think the feds should mandate what those standards are for each state. I think that's the state's right.
Yeah. You don't feel like it's the candidates to motivate the people to get out there? Good,
Yes.
exciting candidate like Barack Obama did.
Yes, I think it's a candidate's responsibility to motivate, but I also think that we ought to consider having a mandate like Australia does.
Fair. Last two questions. 2020 election is coming up. We see, as you said, the Florida primary on March 17th, I believe. Do you have any favorite in the race? And if not, who do you think will come out on top? We see in the new polls, Bernie Sanders has risen up with Joe Biden. Do you like anybody? If not, who do you see?
I do like somebody, and I don't think I publicly want to go
Fair
ahead
enough.
and tell you who I'm going to vote for.
That's fine. Let's talk about the last question. This is more about kind of your wheelhouse. We saw in 2018 Susan Booker. Is that how you say it?
Yes.
Okay,
Booker.
Susan Booker in Palm Beach County, the election supervisor, and also in Broward with Brenda Snipes. There was a lot of issues with that election. We talked about that early in the interview. Both of them got ousted. Susan left on her own, I believe, but Brenda got ousted by Governor DeSantis. Regardless, they're both out of the job. Two Republicans in that job. Rick Scott running around in that election saying voter fraud, and the election wasn't even over yet. There was still 12,000 votes. There was recounts going on. He's already in Washington. Question is, after all that, what was your take on all that? Do you think that those two women that were in election supervisor positions really kind of got the shaft? In plain English, they got screwed out of their positions?
Okay, I don't know anything about Broward County, so I'm not going to comment on something I don't know anything about the election.
Sure.
I believe that Susan Booker is a very honest person.
Yeah.
I believe she did the best that she could. I believe that she did what she thought was the best. I do believe that the Governor DeSantis did remove her. She did not leave on her own. I do believe that she chose not to, as I recall, she chose after he removed her not to
Contest.
challenge that.
Yeah.
I believe that was what.
Right. I think you're right.
But I believe Susan's a very honest person, and she did what she thought was the best. I think that perhaps she should have replaced those machines earlier. She had put in to replace them after this election.
Right.
The machines were old. They could have been replaced earlier. It might have been, her judgment might have been slightly off on that. But I believe she's a very honest person, and she did what she thought was the best.
Lastly, do you think that, as we said, the voter fraud thing is just a bunch of silliness?
I think that I think that if I recall correctly, President Trump put together a committee to look at voter
Right.
fraud, and it was dispersed because nobody could find any voter
Right,
fraud.
yeah.
So I believe that there's very little voter fraud in the United States. I believe there's always some kind of fraud someplace, but I believe it's probably so minute that it wouldn't matter.
Right.
I believe that, of course, it all matters because then you have any fraud threatens our democracy. But I don't believe that there's overall a voters' fraud in uniformly at all.
All right. Thank you so much, Carol, for your time.
You're welcome.
All right.
Thank you.